Alright, let's talk about some absolute crap plus Linklater's new movie. So, of these four, let's go ahead and start with Morbius, which was a movie that just seems like one of those cursed productions, both in pre-production, post-production, and its release. Just everything about this movie seemed to be not great news pretty much every time we heard about it. Most recently being, it's delayed and delayed and delayed. And the fact that the last time Jared Leto was in a comic book movie, he didn't leave the greatest impression. So now that it's finally come out, we hear about all the reviews, and it's apparently just a total piece of shit, and it's getting ripped to pieces, and not many people were surprised. Especially since this is part of the sort of Sony portion of this Marvel universe where Venom has been coming from. The last two Venom movies. And you'll notice that with those, even though they also got, relatively bad reviews and don't have the greatest reputation, there's still there's still some sort of positivity lurking within where people are like, at least it's fun. At least we've got Tom Hardy doing whatever the hell it is he's doing, and that can go a long way, especially with somebody as committed as Hardy. And here you have Leto, who is known for commitment, I suppose. Maybe not in as near as positive of a way as Hardy's performances usually are, but yeah, the interesting thing about that though is that despite commitment being like one of the only saving graces of this area of these movies, and the fact that we know Leto is willing to go to certain places to for whatever role he happens to be doing, there's just kind of not a lot here on all fronts. Like there's, it feels like there's a lot of this movie that just isn't present at all, and most notably, him at the center of it, because it's one of those cases where I'm not even sure it's completely a Leto thing that's the problem with this character, because even if even if Leto was giving it all he possibly could and didn't seem as bland as he does here, I don't know what else he could have done with the material that's given here. Because it just seems like it seems like in the way early stages is when this went wrong. So I'm not really sure by the time you get to the set what you could even have really done. So that's pretty much how it felt going into this, because we do start with, we get this pretty decent sort of cool looking, opening title sequence that lasts for about like 10 seconds. And then we're introduced to Leto, who obviously is Morbius, and he's got this introduction where we kind of, it's one of those cases where we see something and then we're going to go back in time and then come back around. But no, first of all, I don't even really think we come back to this scene. But also, the thing is I was kind of somewhat commending it, because as disjointed as it felt, it was like, it almost felt like there was a confidence in it, which you won't see much throughout this movie, so stick with it while you can. Where usually, if you do the thing where the movie feels the need to start at a certain place and then go back and give you the origin story, usually it's an action scene, because they get really paranoid that they're not going to be able to hook the audience right away, and they don't want to bore them or anything like that. So they get really insecure, and they're like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff to keep you excited, then we'll show you, story-based stuff. But, so it showed restraint and confidence to not start with an action scene. It's just him summoning bats. And it's like, okay, I don't hate this or anything. And it's like, I've seen, openings that are more, insecure than this, or more, not as involving as this. But then, yeah, we go back 25 years, and we get some really disjointed stuff here, and this feels very much like, it feels very much like the opening scenes of the second Venom movie, which is about where my expectations for this were somewhere between Venom and Venom 2. Was, it's like, if it's anywhere in there, then that's pretty much where my expectations are going to be. I'm not expecting it to be great, but I'm also maybe expecting it being ripped to shreds to be a bit blown out of proportion, just a tiny bit. But at the same time coming away understanding why it would be torn to shreds, which there is, which you can also see. So we start off with him as a child and his best friend, who will eventually grow up into Matt Smith, and also the villain. But the thing about this is that you would go into this saying like, oh my god, I'm so tired of origin stories. And it's like, if I have to see one more superhero origin story, or whatever you want to call him, one more time, I'm just gonna scream. But the thing is, yeah, we are getting another origin story, but an origin story that's like constantly danced around, and not in the sense where it was like, when Spider-Man: Homecoming came out and like all of the origin story had already happened, everybody was praising it like, oh, thank God we didn't have to see all that again, but it could just be one line of dialogue because we already know that stuff. Well, the thing about that, though, is that number one, Morbius is not a backstory that a lot of us are going to know, outside of the people that, know him from the source material. But also, it's the way they, like, I don't know if stuff has been cut out or if they just didn't want to bother explain, like they didn't want to delve into the science of it too much because that would have been too much effort to write into the script. So like everything is done in like the vaguest details and just jumping around every time there's a development as to what exactly is going on with him and what causes all this to go down. Especially when it happens to Matt Smith, because we don't even see it happen to him. It's he just shows up and suddenly it's, maybe they're trying to do a fake out thing where we see shrouded attack scenes and you're not really sure whether it's Leto or Smith. Like maybe they were trying to do something with that, but it doesn't have the effect that possibly could have, and it definitely seems like something that would have been done more by accident than on purpose, with the way they were just dancing around everything and not going into too much detail about this origin story. And it's like, maybe you can praise it for not being as long as a typical Marvel movie or superhero movie is these days, with it being like an hour 44 or something, which feels quite short. But I can understand that. But at the same time, like when we saw Venom only it being like an hour 37, everybody was like, oh my god, that's like kind of amazing to see, a big movie like this be that short, because you just don't see that anymore. But this is something that probably could have benefited from having a bit more in it. But it's, at the same time, I also wonder, like, of what we did see, how much could be cut out, because the movie feels like it's going nowhere a lot of the time. Like, it's it's the first time in a long time I've watched, because usually you would say movies like this are too busy, and it's like they're trying to put too much action into it. But it just felt like such a drag a lot of the time, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they danced around the details so much going into it. Was because you kind of feel like you only half know what's happening, and not in that mysterious, intriguing sense. Just in the, this thing was just cut to shit, or the writing is just really lazy, and either one of those is not good news for this. Because there's even moments in the opening scenes when they're in like that orphanage, and it's cutting back and forth, and it kind of looks like it's supposed to be one scene, but based on like the background, I feel like it was two completely different scenes that had somehow been cut into one. And it's and the whole thing kind of has that feel, where you feel just really disjointed and a little lost going into it, but it is going to do what it can to try to distract you with action eventually when it does come. But the trouble is that there's no good action in this really at all. Like, how there's usually at least that one sort of center scene where it's like, this is the big action scene. And it's what you can take away from it's when they show off the most what they can do with the action, and whether it be, the stylizing or choreography or whatever it is. Or just how much shit they can blow, depending on what kind of action scene it is. And there's no standout action scene in it. Like, when you get just these regular, blurry sort of fights or chases or whatever, it's just kind of all that. All at the same consistent level, which is not that great. Like I said, mostly blurry stuff, and they keep doing that thing where they like pause in the middle of the fights to have like a slow motion shot, and it happens in like every single one of them, and that's not enhancing a fucking thing. That's not. It's just like it's almost like it's doing it to, for the sake of the runtime, so the movie's not too short. So it's like if you were to take out all the slow motion shots in this, I feel like you could lop off at least another 20 minutes of that runtime, and the movie would feel even more slight and even more pointless. So I don't know, and they try to do some stuff with point of view shots, but even that is not as enticing as it could be, especially after we just got like this incredible point of view shot in the Batman last month. It's like when you're following that, that's also like I don't typically like to do the whole competing movies thing, but I mean when you see um, how it's done so well, and then you see just a way it can be done really shitty. It just only further highlights the shitty one's shittiness even more. So that's the problem with that. Um, and it's also this is another thing that I don't typically complain about that much because you only need to go into excess so much. But given what the story is, and the fact that it's a vampire movie essentially, it's blatantly bloodless. And that's the thing where you go into this and it's like, yeah, it's a PG-13 movie, and while it's not Marvel Studios, it's got the Marvel name on it, and it's gonna have we've established now that there's gonna be some carryover and a little bit of overlapping, but still, you can go. Movies have gone relatively far with PG-13 as far as blood goes, but this is like we don't really see any detail of any attack or aftermath. And when we do, it's sort of like, when you watch like a trailer or a TV spot for a movie with blood in it, and it's clear that they've like blackened the blood, so it just looks like a splatter of some random thing instead of actual blood. That's what it looks like. It looks like some censored trailer footage or something whenever we see blood. And being a vampire movie, that's a vampire movie without blood. That's clearly something is missing from this, and it feels like it has some sort of gaping hole in it. That is a case where I can understand it being bloodless being baffling, and sort of taking away from it quality wise. And there's so much stuff we could have gone into also character wise about the fact that he's a vampire, about the fact that when he turns he kills people. There's one scene where he's on a boat called the Myrnaw, because how clever. And he's killed people. And then when he comes back and he's Leto again, he looks at the footage, sees what he's done, and he pukes, but then that's pretty much the extent of, oh my god, what kind of monster am I, etc. The stuff that comes with the territory. The sort of, where it feels less like a vampire story, more like a werewolf story, where we do have moments where he, like, has to contain himself like a werewolf does before they turn and stuff like that. But, it's all very, very fleeting and has no weight whatsoever on any of the attempted character stuff that's going on here. There's also something going on as far as him being on the run, because people immediately know that it's him. So, like, Tyrese comes in as a detective with nothing to do. And you would think it's turning into this, on the run story. It's like, hey, what if, Bourne was a vampire in the first movie, in the Bourne Identity, and he was being chased, and it's like, they set that up, but it's like, the main reason that doesn't work is not only do they just not really seem to want to go down that path, but it feels like he's never really even in hiding. Like, he's either just constantly out in public or in places they could easily find him. So, it's like all this stuff you have here that you could be working with and doing something to make this, to where I feel like it's almost like it would have been, the best way to go would have been to make, instead of trying to make it like a horror movie, which they only try pretty much once, with this scene involving like motion sensor lighting, which works to an extent, but like I said, very short-lived. So the idea of making like this action movie about a character that just happens to be a vampire, I would think would be more interesting, but at least in the way that what we saw they're capable of in this movie, where it's like, if you have this character and this storyline in the position that he's in right at this moment in the story, I'd probably prefer an action movie over a horror movie because they don't really set up a horror movie once we finally get to this point. So, but just like either way they went, they brought themselves to a dead end. They wrote themselves into a dead end, really. So there's that, and there's some stuff in here that are probably references, like I sort of say, the Murnau thing is so easy and lazy. But there's another thing where obviously his name is Michael Morbius, and there's a point in time where Matt Smith is pursuing him, but we can't see him. So he's just calling out Michael. And it's like you have two vampires, they're in the midst of a fight, and one of them's in the shadows calling out to Michael. Surely there's a Lost Boys thing happening here on purpose, where it's like, oh yeah, but then at the same time, it's like, just as you catch that, it's like, oh yeah, you're just referencing a movie I'd much rather be watching. So, good for you, I guess, shooting yourself in the foot like that. With like one of the only clever references you made, so clever that I'm not even sure you're doing it on purpose, but I can't tell for sure. And speaking of references, yeah, there is the idea of them being in a certain universe. The Daily Bugle's referenced once or twice, and then there's the thing where they say, they reference that thing that happened in San Francisco or something like that. And it's like, yeah, we know it's in the same universe as Venom, but then that's one thing where it's like they're trying to be cryptic about that. But then there is a moment where Venom is referenced verbally, and it's about as well timed as Will Smith's anger. Like, it just kind of comes from out of nowhere. It makes no sense that it's happening in this particular moment. And it's just there. And once again, maybe they're just establishing the universe, but they basically already did that, and I have no idea why that line is in there, but whatever. So the only person that seems to be having a good time here is Matt Smith, which is fun. He gets to do the villainous, dancing around, and he seems to be, he gets to have a lot more fun here with a villainous role than say like in Last Night in Soho, where he just kind of had to lurk, and jump at the camera. Here he gets to like have fun with it. He's pretty much the only one that comes out of it unscathed, or at least not completely forgotten. So that's about all we're getting, because Jared Harris is here, but it's a completely throwaway part. You know exactly the purpose that he serves, and that's unfortunate to waste an actor of his caliber here. Which I feel funny saying, since we literally have an Oscar winner as our star, and it just feels like he's here, and he's mostly CGI, is what it feels like. So it almost feels like Leto's only even half here. So there's, like I said, there's really only so much he can even do, if you want to try throwing criticism at him. But I'm not even sure with this material what else he could have done, because it's all just so... The character of Morbius himself is just so bland. Because, like I said, because it all comes back to that beginning stuff where we're not really getting... We're only getting vague details of what's even going on, when you could be focusing on his character and building him up as a sympathetic character. Which they only do, funny enough, with Matt Smith, who is our villain. So the movie only wants you to feel sympathetic towards the villain, it seems, which is telling. So I don't know. And then after we get our climax, first of all, I wasn't even sure we were at our climax when we were at the climax, and then almost before I even realized it was the climax, it was over. And I don't mean the climax was over. I mean the movie was over. I mean, there's a fight, and then the movie's just done. It's like, I don't know, it's like the movie gave up. Where it's like the movie was thinking like, dude, I was on like life support when I got here. Just let me die. It's like, here's the climax, here's two characters, here's a showdown. I'm done now, let me rest. Is how this movie was. But no, he's not quite ready to rest yet, because we do have, I guess technically, two credit scenes. Not a post. Luckily, I was informed beforehand that there's nothing after the main credit roll, so I didn't sit in the theater for no reason. They put everything in the first set of credits, which is I guess it's not a spoiler to say, because apparently he's in the trailer from what I was told. Yeah, that's when we get our Michael Keaton stuff. And, I don't know what that was. Because we've been waiting. We've been waiting ever since Homecoming. It's like, oh man, when is Toombs gonna come back, and what's he gonna do when he comes back? Because we got that scene with him and Michael Mondo in the prison, and it's like, that's the shit I've been waiting for. I don't know about everybody else, but I don't know what the hell this is. So, yeah. I don't know. And it also reeks of like, hey, we shot this like 2 weeks before the movie came out. For some reason, I don't know. I don't know what all the disjointedness is as far as the production goes, because they had so much fucking time. But I don't know. So there it is. Like, I don't even hate it. I'm just really, really struggling to. I had to really, really work my brain to not forget about it until I could do this video. It's like, just hang on to Morbius just a little longer, and it's like, now that I've pretty much talked about it as much as I can, it's probably just gonna vanish from my mind. And if anybody asks me another question about Morbius in the future, I'll be like, you know what? I have no recollection of that movie. I have no idea. So that's pretty much. I mean, I usually end up watching all the Marvel movies more than once, even the shitty ones. So I'll probably eventually end up seeing this again, especially if it, starts to tie into other things or whatever. But right now, like I said, it's barely hanging on in my brain because it's just so. I guess just so slight and fleeting, despite what it is. It could have been one of the more hardcore movies we've gotten here. I guess you could say the same thing about the Venom movies. But yeah, they just barely hang in there. So we'll see. We'll see how long it takes me to forget it now. That'll be the next thing to come. So in the meantime, let's go into The Bubble, which is Judd Apatow's new movie. Speaking of movies I'd love to forget soon, I've done a lot of Apatow bashing since we've been doing this whole review thing, and even before that. Of all of the movies directed by Apatow, I think I like 3 of them. I like The 40-Year-Old Virgin, I like Funny People, and I like The King of Staten Island. The rest are either super overrated, or completely forgettable, or borderline bad. Yes, I'm not a fan of Knocked Up, in case you're wondering where that is. So, going to this, I thought, okay, so this is a little different. It seems a little different from what he usually does. Because one of Apatow's big problems is he wants so incredibly badly to be a dramatic director, it seems. He wants to do all of his raunchy comedy and all of his one-liners and all of his ad-libs. But then at the end of the day, he wants to make like a really serious drama, and he has no fucking idea how to balance those two things. Um, which is his main problem. So it was like, to see this, and it's like, I read the synopsis and I saw the poster, and I was like, oh, so he's going for like a straight up comedy now. And it's like, okay, this, like, it's like just completely straightforward comedy, and obviously satire too, I guess you could say. So it's like, okay, this might be interesting if he's gonna like fully commit to just comedy, just from beginning to end, and not try to force, some sort of drama into it or something, or try to tell some real story about real people, or whatever the fuck it is he's trying to do, a lot of the time. So yeah, so I mean, here he is telling a story that has reality in it, is about people that seem to exist to a degree here. You could, like, that's the beauty of satires. It's like trying to find the line between exaggeration and reality, and sometimes how it blurs. And you can see what he's going for here, where it's got a lot of Tropic Thunder in it. Attempts at Tropic Thunder in it, where he's got a cast here, and they're trying to do the 6th movie in this sort of. It kind of looks like the Tremor series, but with dinosaurs. But apparently they're like really big. They look straight to video by what we see in here, but apparently we're supposed to assume they're like these big blockbuster movies. They're like the Transformers or the Jurassic Parks of this universe. And obviously they're doing this in like a quarantine space because of COVID, and that's what the plot is. But you've got all these really, narcissistic celebrities. Like, it almost seems like the whole thing was spawned from that Imagine video, if I had to guess. Because it's basically the one joke is that everybody's narcissistic. It's also like he's trying to bring, like, this is the end into a bit also, but it's that's the thing is you can see so many better movies in here and so many better satires in here, and this one's just really desperate and kind of pathetic. When you see it trying to get the laughs, and it's weird. It simultaneously feels like it's trying way too hard and just not doing anything at all. It's really weird that you accomplish this level of bad. It was actually quite shocking. Like, when it was about maybe like 15 or 20 minutes in, and I was like, man, this just really isn't very funny. That's a bummer. And it's over 2 hours because it's a goddamn Apatow movie. Maybe it'll pick up. Let's see. And it gets worse. It gets a lot worse and a lot more desperate. And it's a lot of the stuff that makes Apatow, it's like Apatow at his worst, where it's not really trying to shoehorn drama in necessarily, but that whole idea of it almost seems like they're ad-libbing the script as they go. And it's like you get to a point where, like, you see like behind the scenes footage of stuff like if you ever seen the behind the scenes footage of when they were doing the chest waxing in the 4-Year-Old Virgin, and it's like this for pretty much all their movies, where it's the director's off camera just shouting new lines at them in the moment, and that's essentially what it is. Where it's like you're not even sure what the hell the script even looked like when they started, and to the point that it doesn't even matter. So that's that's the thing is, when you see the movies, though, usually what ad-libbing is that you have the actors say a bunch of lines, a bunch of different lines, and then whatever the best line ends up being, whatever the biggest laugh ends up being, is what ends up in the movie. But with Apatow, it feels like they do that, and then they don't do any editing. All the fucking lines are just in there. And that's... And 99% of them were the ones that should be cut. But like there's a moment in particular here where I don't even remember what the fucking context it is, but GuzCon is having like a tantrum, and he mentions like he's going into Batman, and he just rattles off all the names of the Batman, like all the actors that have played them, and like that's what. Scenes like that are the kind that are like really baffling to me and basically sum up entirely what's wrong with this style in general. And it's like it worked at a time. Like when Avatar was like at the very top when he was first coming in as a director, this is the kind of stuff that killed. And you heard people just quoting his movies just non-stop. Not just movies he directed, but just anything with his name on it at all, as a producer or anything like that. Basically anything Seth Rogen was doing in that period. People were just quoting non-stop, and they were considered, instant comedy classics and all that. And I don't think he's never really, like, personally, I've never really seen any of his movies as that iconic, apart from maybe The 40-Year-Old Virgin, but the fact that I can't see that ever happening to a movie like any of the lines in The Bubble, I can't imagine hearing people say, not that I don't know. I never understood the concept of quoting much anyway, because it's just like, hey, I saw this movie and this was a funny line in it, and that was a funny line in it, and it's like, that's what riveting discussion. But it's but I don't want to seem like pretentious or anything or above what makes comedies great, because obviously that is what makes comedies great, is there these comedic lines that stick with you, sure, of course, but I can't remember a single... This movie's over 2 hours. I can't remember a single line hitting. I can't remember the fucking context of the Batman thing. It's just all so jumbled all the time. And it's like, there's nothing... Like, they're not even... The idea is that they're stuck in this place and they're going crazy because of cabin fever and stuff like that. And, oh, they're narcissists. They have to be out, getting attention drawn to them or whatever. But they're stuck and they can't do anything. Like, yeah, okay, we get it. That's the setup. That's the joke. Okay, but what does that lead? What? This is the point where you have to ask yourself, okay, but can this be a movie? Like, okay, it's a joke, but can it be a movie? And I don't foresee any way we could have stretched this out, let alone to over 2 hours, to warrant this, to warrant the fact that this movie exists. So, we have stuff, we have like a couple of things here where it's like, yeah, that deserves a joke. Like, Fred Armisen plays the director. He's like super pretentious and super artsy because he's a Sundance director. He won at Sundance. He's an indie director, and they brought him in for this big thing. And that's a thing. For some unexplained reason, Hollywood has this thing of taking indie directors that break out for indie movies, really, really small movies, and giving them blockbusters. And it almost never works out. And so, like it's clear that, Armisen's supposed to be like a Colin Trevorrow type or something. And they're running with that joke, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's like, I recognize what that is. And then we get stuff like, what's his daughter's name? Iris Apatow, comes in, and it's, yeah, because it wouldn't be a Judd Apatow movie if he weren't throwing his family at us. But the thing here is that she's playing this character that is a TikTok person, TikTok star, that's being shoehorned into this movie. And it's like, yeah, that's a good joke too, because we see that. Like, we recognize it, just the way we recognize indie directors get handed blockbusters for some reason. Even though it just seems like a bad combination. But what jokes are you going to make out of this? Every character in this is one joke that they have to stretch out every time they're on screen. But it's one thing to have a joke where it's, oh, the director's an artsy indie type. But because another one joke idea for a character is that they are a TikTok person, what do you think that means? I feel like I have to criticize a movie for this every time I do a goddamn video now. Just fucking endless filler dancing. This movie is over 2 hours. Half of it, I feel like half of it, is either dancing or montages. It's like, you see what I'm talking about, where it's like, yeah, Apatow is already known for dragging his movies out with a shitload of ad-libbing, almost none of which is actually funny. And it's like, the fact that he's I don't know what so many of his obsessions are on display here. He's got this really, really weird fixation on vomiting if you watch his filmography. And of course that's gonna be here. That's expected at this point. But this idea that his movies have to break the 2 hour mark, even by a few minutes, I don't get why he thinks he has to do that. Because it is completely clear. He was looking at the material here, and like, his first question was, how do I get this to over 2 hours, though? Not like, how do I get this to 90 minutes or even just feature length. It was like, how do I get this to over 2 hours? Because that's my thing. So it's like, dancing, and dancing, and montages, and more dancing, and more montages, and more montages, and more dancing, and more montages. Stupid ad-libbing that makes no sense, completely disjointed, and it's over. I don't know. I don't know where. Like I said, what it all comes down to is it feels like it was just an idea. That if anybody in their right mind that knew what they were doing would stop eventually in the writing process. I said, not that there would be much of a writing process because you're just going to shout the script on the set anyway. But the idea of, you would only get so far before you'd say, you know what, I don't think this is going to be feature length. Like, I've got a joke, I got a few jokes for each character. Like, each character is like one joke, and that's what I've got. Maybe this isn't made for feature length. Maybe this isn't a movie. But then, at the same time, to be fair to him, this is a Netflix movie. And if you were to go to Netflix and you were to say, you know what, I took my dog out the other day and I had my camera out, and he took like the biggest fucking shit ever, and I recorded it. If I put that on a loop and got it to about an hour 45 or 2 hours and 15 minutes, if you throw in some random movie quotes and movie references, Netflix, do you think you'd put this out? And Netflix would just tell you what I've been thinking about it. We will put it on the front page. We will put all of our marketing into this. You know, forget that Linklater put a movie out on the same day as this. Linklater put a movie out the same day as this, and all the fucking promotion you see anywhere is Apatow and or the cast talking about this. It's funny how much Netflix is willing to throw at filmmakers while at the same time feeling like they are extremely anti-movie. I don't know. I don't know what happened here. I don't know what the point of all this is. But I don't know why this movie even exists. And they had an opening for one joke at the end, where it was the one time where I would have encouraged, you could have done more with that. Like, you could have done more with that one joke. Keegan-Michael Key has to fly a helicopter, and there's an urgency here. So the joke is that they pull up a YouTube tutorial, and Iris Apatow gets distracted by a video of a monkey getting bathed, and they all get distracted by that. And it's like, you were almost there. The joke was almost there. And I don't want to, Apatow is, whether I like it or not, Apatow is a legend in the comedy industry, obviously. So I would, I wouldn't want to seem too arrogant to say, I know what you're doing and you don't, but I really feel like this joke should have been, they pull up a YouTube tutorial, and when it's time is of the essence, so King Monkey's watching this, and the guy doing the tutorial goes on about his fucking sponsors for 10 minutes before he goes into the tutorial itself. I think that was the joke. But no. Like, once they finally stopped watching the monkey getting bathed, the tutorial just went as is, and King Monkey flew out of there. I don't know. I don't fucking know. What do I know? I'm sitting here, Apatow's out there making this with that cast. Cast? What? Who is it? Keegan-Michael Key, Leslie Mann. I shun Apatow for, like, saying, oh, you're throwing your family ass. I do love Leslie Mann. I do, okay? But there's also Dave Duchovny, Gus Kahn, I mentioned, Maria Bakalova, Karen Gillan, I guess. Just when I think I like her, she does something really shitty. Like, just when I watch the Guardians movies, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm kind of into her. Gunpowder Milkshake happens. And then it's like, oh, Jumanji, okay, yeah, she's cool. And then this happens. And it's because when her lows are so low. Like, she'll do something good. It'll be like, oh, she's fun. She's cool. And then she'll just do the worst fucking thing. It's weird. It's really weird. I don't know what's going on with her or her agent or whoever the hell's responsible for this, but yeah. So, I don't know what the fuck this was, but I hope I never see it again, that's for sure. So, let's go on to another sack of shit that went straight to streaming. Moonshot. This one's on HBO Max. And it has Cole Sprouse, I believe. It is a futuristic romantic comedy set in 2049. Sci-fi movie set in 2049, that sounds familiar. So, he is obsessed with going to Mars, and going to Mars is possible now. People are already, living up there because of, Zach Braff. This is where this movie is. Zach Braff is the reason the future is what it is. So brace yourself for that. So, when it starts, it is, what's essentially supposed to be the charm of this concept, I gather, is, it's supposed to be like your regular, ordinary romantic comedy, like a classic romantic comedy. It just happens to be set in this sort of sci-fi future. And I can get where that could be fun to explore, but the trouble is that there is no genre that is more aggressively, annoyingly cliche and obvious and predictable and oftentimes bad than the romantic comedy. So, And so the big question here is like, how do they do like the war, like setting up the world and stuff like that? Like, is it going to be this really interesting blend of what we know versus the uncertainty of the future that this universe has set up? Um, no, it's like 99% the romantic comedy, 1%. Oh, by the way, space is in the background. So yeah. So immediately we start off with this just really, really shitty, like aggressively shitty dialogue throughout. Whether it be, misuse of the word projecting, or really awkward exchanges about touching each other. Like there's the main girl and her boyfriend Mason Gooding, who's already on Mars, I think. And they have a long distance relationship, and that's something the movie kind of sets up, where it's like long distance relationships with interplanetary travel and stuff like that. There's something there, I suppose. But it's just treated like any other thing. Once again, maybe that's the charm. That it's treated as any other long-distance relationship. They're just years and years apart from each other. But it's... I don't know. But on that, though, is our main character, who is Cole Sprouse. And he is, like I said, he has this obsession with getting to Mars, and so he's going to attach himself to anything and everything that can possibly get him there by annoying the shit out of everybody he comes into contact with. So, here's the thing. And by the way, this character's name is Walt. And the reason I know this is because the name Walt is probably said about 2,000 fucking times in the time frame of this entire movie, and probably about 500 of those are in the first 15 minutes. And there's even a portion of the movie where he's not even going by Walt. He's posing as somebody else, which makes that even more completely ridiculous, but not in any intentional way. It's just really fucking annoying. Where his name is just as annoying as the character is. So we're getting bombarded with all these other characters and all these other relationships that aren't even really established that well until like the last 15 minutes or so. And just everything feels really unintelligible for a while. He's meeting somebody that he falls in love with instantly, and it's like I had to to the point that I had to stop and say like, wait a minute, did he already know this person? I kind of can't even tell. And so he's the kind of character, because stuff like that can happen. He's so annoying, yet his annoyingness is supposed to be charming, which I can't really tell because obviously they're twins, I can't really tell them apart. Is Cole the one that's in 5 Feet Apart? Because I remember watching 5 Feet Apart and going, oh, he's not bad. He's not bad as an actor at all. Okay. So, I'm struggling, assuming that was him, I'm struggling to put any blame on him as an actor. It's definitely the way this character is written, because he's supposed to be this really average dude, even though he's significantly more annoying than the average dude. But the thing is like, he's supposed to be a guy, he's supposed to be relatable because he can't achieve his dreams and he's stuck in one place and all that. But yet, I have never seen an average character get so much just handed to them throughout a movie. And it's like he's supposed to have all these, conflicts and all these things that he can't reach, and he's just striving and striving. But yet, once it gets to a certain point of the movie, it just, like, his problems just get solved like magic. It's just like, oh, there's this thing that's just completely in your favor, and here's this thing that's completely in your favor, and this thing. And he accomplishes it by being annoying and whiny and needy and clingy, and it's disgusting. It's been a while since I've wanted to beat a character senseless so badly, but here we are. Metaphorically, of course. So that's the thing. The annoying thing here especially is that it's supposed to be charming to the point that it just eventually works on people. Like, it's almost like people... You don't even get the sense that people are won over by his charm. You're getting the idea that they're submitting to him. To where it's like okay, if I do this gigantic favor for you that could ruin my life, will you just shut up and leave me alone? And it's like, oh, if I just fall in love with you, will you shut the fuck up? And it's like, that's what it feels like. And it's... And the fact that it's... To see these characters turn, where it's like he does these really gross things. He reads her text messages. He learns everything about her life against her will and everything about her and her boyfriend's relationship. That's weird, right? Well, the thing about it is that he says, I know everything about yours and her boyfriend's relationship, and I don't think I don't think he deserves you. And I think you're right in all your arguments. And you know what she says? That is weird, yet touching. It's one of those fucking movies where that shit is what flies. I didn't even know you could still make movies like this. I thought those were stuck in the 80s and 90s. So, when they talk about, like, just to throw the term out there, I guess, like incels, and they say that the problem with people like that is because of romantic comedies. Like, romantic comedies romanticize the idea of being clingy and being weird and creepy would win them over, and they'd find it touching or cute or romantic. And it's like, well, if this movie should find an audience, congratulations, you're going to have a lot more of those. You're going to have a brand new batch of those people. So, great. Wonderful. So, and when I was talking about, I was talking before about how dancing is the go-to filler thing. There's also, like talking about Zach Braff, for instance. Like, remember how, that era where people just really didn't like indie movies because they were so needlessly quirky? They were trying so hard to be cutesy. And so people would do things for the sake of being random. Remember that era? Well, the main girl here has a tic where when there's a lot of tension and she's really nervous, she dances in place. Because she's so adorably quirky and cutesy and makes me want to put a goddamn gun in my mouth. So when you're dealing with, these are the two main characters. And it's that thing where, they can't stand each other, they drive each other crazy. And this is where I was talking about, where it's like, if you find the formula of the romantic comedy charming, regardless of its, package or whatever, then go ahead. This has all the shit in it. All the really dated shit that we could have sworn we were getting past as society moves on, but I guess not. So, this is... I just keep coming back. It's gross. It's just really gross. And as far as story-wise and situation-wise, the next thing that comes to romantic comedy is the situations. You get stuff where he is pretending to be Mason Gooding, to be on this ship or whatever. So they get stuck in these scenarios where they know that she is Mason Gooding's girlfriend, but they apparently don't know what he looks like, which is weird. So they have to... So he has to pretend to be him, so they have to pretend to be a couple when they're in public. And, we've seen that age-old scenario where the people that aren't actually a couple are pretending to be a couple, and so find themselves in a situation where they're forced to act like a couple to make it believable. We get those in here, and I've seen so many shitty, forced romantic comedies, but I have never seen that particular trope this forced. It is like every character has to be a fucking weirdo. I don't know what is wrong with this movie, but every fucking character in it is so weird. And it's like they're basically... These are like authority figures, too. And they're like forcing them to do couple shit to prove that they are who they say they are. And it's... I can feel my eye twitching. I don't know if that's the lack of sleep or these recent movies, but Jesus fucking Christ. This is, like, what is going on? I don't... Okay, another thing going on here is, this movie is really weirdly preoccupied with sex. And, if everything in this movie wasn't weird enough, and everybody involved in this movie wasn't weird enough, like everything everybody tries to force an innuendo into just about every piece of dialogue, even the AI around them, the AI that just responds or that you can ask questions to or whatever, or tells you what's happening. Everything's always a sexual suggestion first, and it doesn't feel like it's a running joke or anything. It just feels like the writers were preoccupied, like maybe they were in quarantine too long when they were writing this or something. But I don't know. It's really weird. And there's and obviously the character types. There's going to be characters that are really obvious, like obviously Mason Gooding is the boyfriend, so we know that he's going to be revealed to be some sort of douchebag. It's just and like to give him no sort of like I think Mason Gooding shot this entire thing in one place. We never see him not on a screen. So he's not going to have any development anyway. So the only character growth that he gets is suddenly there's a douchey tone in his voice when the story has to shift to, oh, she likes a annoying guy more, it turns out. So there's that whole thing, which just leaves a bad taste. And then there's the other characters. You have to have the side character that's trying way too hard to be funny. And believe it or not, there is a character in this that is even more annoying than Cole Sprouse's character. She is a character named Captain Tartar. And every single time, it got to the point where every single time I saw her face, let alone before she even started talking, I just wanted to smash my fucking head through the wall. And it's like to introduce this character, the main character, Walt, and it's like you think he's going to be the most annoying person you meet in this movie. It is actually shocking that they found another character that's even worse. It's crazy. And it's like they were trying to out annoy themselves, out annoy the story as they went on, and it just gets more. I don't know. Because I wanted to give this movie some credit for its production values, at least. But even that, there's no creativity here. It just looks like, they're on a space shuttle or something. Or some space station of sorts. I don't know. But like the technology and stuff like that, there's nothing inspired here. It was all the focus was on it being some stupid romantic comedy, and oh, by the way, it's in space. So, and they keep saying the word adventure throughout this, as if we're on one. When not really. It basically becomes the equivalent of, oh my god, do you know what this movie is? I'm just realizing. This movie is basically Biodome if the two leads were falling in love. Does anybody remember Biodome? If you do, you know why this is a problem. And it's... I don't... That's what I'm saying, is I thought we left these movies behind. I thought we were in like this is like the 80s and 90s we were having to deal with this shit. But, no. And just, when it all comes down to it, when you just don't give a fuck about anybody in the movie, you're already in a dead zone. But the fact that it gets this annoying and this borderline disturbing, I don't know how you get to this point. I have no idea how a movie like this sees the light of day. And yeah, you can say, yeah, it went straight to streaming. It still went straight to streaming on HBO Max. That's still pretty high profile. So, and there's been marketing for it. I feel like every time I watched YouTube last week, there was some fucking ad for it. And I would have never suspected this. I would have never suspected this is what it is, but good God. It's alarming that movies like this can still be made. So, yeah. So, let's take a breather. And let's go to Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood, I believe it's called. It's the full title. This one is the one that's Linklater's new movie. The one that nobody... that's not getting any press or marketing whatsoever. Just Linklater puts a movie out, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way. But no, watch all this shitty shit. And don't worry about the Linklater movie over here. It's nothing. Don't ignore the good shit. This is apparently the year of bad shit, for the most part. So we gotta cover up Linklater's movie as much as we can. I mean, it's a pure Linklater movie. And what was interesting was I wasn't quite sure what kind of movie we were getting, because I went into this practically blind, because like I knew about the existence of this movie maybe just a month ago, if that. And so it starts off as one thing, and people, I could see people potentially being disappointed um, if they think they're getting one thing, because it sets itself up like it's a kid going into space movie, like this sort of fantasy movie that you would have seen like back in the day. Only it's that sort of rotoscope animation stuff that he was doing with like Waking Life and A Scanner Darkly and stuff like that. He's come back to that, which is this really great way of sort of blurring like reality and fantasy and kind of going into this, using it in this particular sense to go and like inside a child's mind and imagination and seeing like everything through their eyes, and then kind of how that blurs with fantasy and imagination and stuff like that. But what's really great about that is, yeah, we saw that with stuff like Waking Life, but then there's also another style of Linklater that is also in this movie. The stuff we saw in like Boyhood or Everybody Wants Some or something like that, where it's like it's just sort of people living in an era, and just the absolute minute details of that entire, like every single little detail about living in that particular era amongst these people. And that's what most of, like, it sets it up like it's going to be the kid going to space movie, but that's like the first 10 minutes, and the rest of it is just this kid living in Texas during the space race. And that's basically it. Where it's one of those cases where if you get attached to the angle of the kid going to space and all that kind of thing, you're gonna kind of be waiting for the movie to circle back around, when it's not the movie's intention to circle back around. It's the coming of age story during the space race is what the movie is. It just kind of has this thing almost in the background, pretty much, to basically set up this character, this kid that we're seeing it through the eyes of. And he's narrating this as an adult, and the adult voice is Jack Black. And it's one of those cases where it's like, it was about maybe 10 minutes into the coming of age stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm into this. This is nice. Like, this wasn't what I thought it was, but I'm into it. And then just the more it goes on, the more you fall into this, and it's like, it basically feels like time traveling to an era you weren't even alive in. And it puts you there in every single detail. I said, with the way the animation is, it almost feels like you're looking back on a memory that you yourself don't even have. And it's like, that's something that Linklater has always obviously done so well. It's just putting you in with these people and make you feel like you're growing up with them, or like part of their group or something like that. In this particular case, feeling like you're part of this family. And like, not every character is well rounded. Like, there's sisters there that just kind of come in and out, that don't really get much focus, and you might forget their names at times. But there still somehow manages to feel a way to feel so lived in, through this whole thing, and just like and it's one of those cases also where it doesn't put too much focus on stuff and feel movie like. It still feels like memories, like actual real memories. Like, there's all this build up to them seeing the launch for the first time, and it's like, if this were a movie, there'd be a moment where they were all sitting around the TV and they all watched this, and it's a big moment that changed their lives forever. And in the actual movie, they decide to go to a water park instead, and they just hear through other people, hey, the launch happened. And it's like, and it's details like that make it feel so incredibly real, and like something you experienced yourself. And then when they're actually walking on the moon, and it's like, once again, in an actual movie, you'd see them sitting around the TV watching them walk on the moon, and it's like this life-changing event. And in the movie, all the kids fall asleep while that's going on, and it's like, it's everything. And it's like, you can tell, like, I'm assuming, I don't have any like confirmation on really anything. I haven't looked anything up, but I can only assume these are Linklater's like actual sort of memories. Like, it's almost like it's his Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or his Licorice Pizza. And it's like, and I love that we're getting so many of these. Like, you might seem like, it seems like we're kind of wearing down on this and like getting these eras and stuff like, people might be getting sick of the 60s and 70s era and stuff like that. with all these movies, but I've realized that I just can't get enough of it. Where it's like the most appealing, relaxing history lesson ever. It's like it's the best compliment I can give it. And it's yeah, and learning all this stuff where it's like when we see all the different TV shows that we're on, it's like I was talking about reading the book for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it's basically Tarantino giving you an education on the entertainment of the era. And it's like there's just something so fascinating about that to me. I could read it for hours and hours and hours. And sure enough, there is a scene in this movie where Linklater takes us through like every single TV show that was on at the time, and it's like I can just imagine people not being interested, or I can see people tuning out of this and stuff like that. But it's like I just being taken to this particular era and being introduced to the entertainment of this time is something that I just completely eat up. I can't get enough of it. I really, really love it. And the way that it puts you right there, especially when you're looking at a child's point of view, because, yeah, you know, kids go outside and they play a lot, but also, like, a lot of memories are going to be whatever was on TV at the time when you were growing up. And it's like that. It just really feels like it puts you in the mindset of that point of view. And yeah, and because I could see people wanting the space movie, especially with the animation. I could see, like the way we got that, like seeing, the actual space stuff, like doing a full on space movie with this kind of animation. I could see people wanting that movie also for sure. Or maybe, if they were more into Waking Life, they'll want something a bit more philosophical, rather than just like because it's not even just like because at least in Dazed and Confused, even though Dazed and Confused was something like this, they also had like those conversations, where they talked about things that would kind of make you think about your own life and where you were headed or where you were at that particular time or something like that. And it doesn't even really feel like that either. It just feels like going inside memories that are not your own, yet somehow you feel like they're your own personal ones, because there's like just enough of a correlation there to where it's like, well, I wasn't alive in this era, but in this particular sense it feels like this era that I grew up in. And it's like, oh, when he references this sort of thing, it's like, oh, that's kind of how I felt about this particular thing in my childhood, which is not the same but close enough. And you can just find that connection as it goes on, and relate to it in all those different ways. And like I said, it's so easy. People often criticize, nostalgia as being a thing that's easy to accomplish, and that's why people like certain movies. And every time I hear that, I just want to tell those people to go fuck themselves, because it's like, there is a way to do it where it's really easy and lazy, and there's a way to do it that just completely transfers you in this really beautiful, transcendent way, and takes you to a place emotionally that's not so easy to pull off. It's much easier said than done. There is a difference between those two, the lazy and the effective. So that's what I think is accomplished here. I didn't really write anything down to talk about, because that's kind of an impossible thing to do. This is just one of those movies you just kind of have to watch and feel for yourself, and it will take you there. Especially if you're like Linklater is a director that's already kind of gotten inside you, and like anything that he does is able to take you to that place effortlessly. Then that's yeah, because even Suburbia, I think, is one of his movies that's seen as somewhat lesser than his others. I just saw it for the first time last year, and because I just was in such a Linklater mood at the time, I honestly kind of loved it. So it's like, if he's already sort of in there and ingrained in you, you had no trouble with this whatsoever. It's such a Linklater movie, and I love it for that. But it's such a Linklater movie in like at least a couple of ways, where it's like it's not just like the one type of Linklater. We get a couple that we're familiar with, but they blend together so beautifully. So that's pretty much like I said. It's kind of hard to put into words. You just kind of have to feel for yourself. But it's worth doing if you're already a Linklater fan. If not, you'll struggle. You'll probably tune out. You'll probably turn it off because it's fucking Netflix. And it's because there's always the next option when it's there. But and like I said, if you're already into Linklater, then if you're already into, I would hope you've already seen it by now. But if you have not, or if you needed just one like other small push or something, I really quite love this. So yeah, and it's just so nice to get a really good movie. like they're so rare these last few months, but here we are. So at least as far as this year's releases. So the next thing is Sonic and Ambulance, and then I will probably do a belated thing on the Lost City and a few other things, a few other streaming things, and then we'll go from there. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.